I was folding my laundry when my son Derek and his wife Vanessa walked in without knocking. Derek's face was tight, his jaw twitching the way it used to when he was a teenager and wanted to say something cruel but didn't dare. "Mom," he said, "we've decided. You're moving out tomorrow." I thought I'd misheard him. The Florida sun was spilling through the window, turning the dust into glitter. I'd lived in this small pastel house for 23 years, ever since my late husband Richard built it with his own hands after retiring from the Coast Guard. Every corner held something of him, his fishing hat still hanging by the door, his old watch ticking faintly in the drawer beside my bed. I blinked at Derek. "Moving out? What are you talking about?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Come on, Margaret, you've had your time here. Derek and I talked to a realtor. This property is worth at least $1.2 million now. We can finally upgrade to a bigger house in Sarasota. You'll thank us later when you're settled in a nice assisted living community." I felt the blood drain from my face. An assisted living community. This is my home. "Correction," Vanessa said sharply. "It was your home. Dad left it to both of you, remember? When he passed, that meant Derek's name went on the deed, too." She waved a folded document like it was a weapon. "We've already signed the papers. Closing's in 2 days. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, mumbling, "It's for the best, Mom. You'll have nurses' activities, friends your age." Friends my age, I already had them at the pier at the diner on Atlantic Avenue where old-timers gathered every Thursday for pancakes and gossip. I didn't need some sterile place with bingo nights and curfews. I took a step closer to my son, the boy I once held through thunderstorms, who used to cry when his goldfish died. "You can't just throw me out," he sighed. "I'm not throwing you out, Mom. We're giving you a new start." Vanessa snapped Derek, "Stop feeling guilty. She should be grateful. We even booked movers for tomorrow morning." That's when I saw it, the coldness in her eyes, like she'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it. My heart cracked in a way I didn't know it still could. I whispered, "Does it make you happy, Vanessa? Taking an old woman's home?" She smiled. "It makes me practical." I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a trembling breath. I turned away, pretending to tidy the table just so they wouldn't see my tears. The shells Richard collected from our first beach walk were still in the bowl. He used to say they were tiny pieces of forever. Now they just look like trash someone forgot to throw away. I don't remember how long they stayed. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe a lifetime. When the door slammed behind them, the silence was heavier than thunder. That night, I sat in my recliner staring at the photo on the wall, Richard, Derek, and me, smiling by the old fishing boat. We'd been so proud that day. I thought if I stared long enough, maybe time would rewind. Maybe my son would walk in and say, "I'm sorry, Mom, we're not selling." But the next morning, I woke to the rumble of a moving truck outside. 2 young men in uniforms were already on my porch, clipboard in hand. Vanessa stood beside them wearing sunglasses and a smile. "Morning, Margaret. We'll start with the furniture. You don't need to lift a finger." Something inside me snapped. I'd been polite all my life, smiling at rude neighbors, forgiving betrayals that cut too deep. But this was too far. I stood in the doorway and said quietly, "You'll regret this." Vanessa laughed. "Oh, please. What are you going to do, call the police?" I didn't answer, because what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd already made a call. When Derek reached for the doorknob to unlock the front door and let the movers in, it didn't budge. Confused, he turned the handle again. From the other side, a voice spoke firmly. "Palm County Police Department. Step back from the door, sir." Vanessa's smile vanished. "What? Why are they?" Before she could finish, 2 uniformed officers pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Mrs. Lane," one of them asked, looking at me. "Yes," I said, standing tall for the first time in months. He nodded. "We received your report," Vanessa stammered. "Report? What report?" The officer's voice was calm but cold, the one about property fraud and elder coercion. And for the first time that morning, I was the one who smiled. When the officers stepped inside that morning, everything seemed to slow down. The sunlight hit the old family photos on the wall. Derek's high school graduation, our first Christmas in this house. Richard in his Navy uniform, and for a moment I almost forgot why they were there. Then I saw Vanessa clutching her purse like she was about to be robbed, and I remembered. As they spoke to her, I sat on the edge of my recliner staring at the wrinkles on my hands. I used to hate them, the loose skin, the spots. Now they were proof of everything I had survived. I was 68 years old, born and raised in Florida, the daughter of a fisherman and a church pianist. My whole life had been tied to this stretch of sand and salt air. When Richard and I married, we had nothing but a rusted pickup truck, a dream, and the promise that as long as we've got each other, we'll be fine. He joined the Coast Guard, worked his way up to Chief Petty Officer, and when he retired, we built this house together, 2 bedrooms, white shutters, a porch that faced the sunrise. Richard used to say it's not much, but it's ours. We didn't have fancy vacations or expensive cars, but we had a life full of little moments, fishing at dawn pancakes at Benny's Diner on Sundays, slow dances in the kitchen when our song came on the radio. I thought that would be enough to carry us through anything. Then came the heart attack. It was just after Thanksgiving. He'd been decorating the porch lights, humming along to Bing Crosby. By the time I got to him, the ladder had already fallen. I remember his hand reaching out, then nothing. For the next year, I barely left the house. Derek helped with the funeral arrangements, but he had his own family, his own worries. I never blamed him for not calling more often. I thought that's just how grown kids were, busy, distracted, but still good at heart. When Vanessa came along, I tried my best to like her. She was sharp, ambitious, the kind of woman who looked at life like a business deal. She told me once family is about efficiency, Margaret. I didn't understand what that meant until Richard's life insurance check came in $180,000. Derek said it was better to let him handle it for tax reasons. I trusted him. I always trusted him. But that money disappeared faster than smoke in the wind. He said it went toward mortgage adjustments and repairs. I didn't ask questions. I just kept paying the property taxes and electricity bills out of my retirement savings, about $1,300 a month on a fixed income. The neighbors in the retirement community were kind. There was Patty from down the street who always brought over leftover key lime pie, and Mr. Holden, a retired police officer who'd stop by every Thursday for coffee. They called me Miss Maggie. I liked that. It made me feel seen. I tell them stories about Derek, how he used to build sandcastles taller than himself, how he cried when he lost his first tooth. Patty would smile and say, "He sounds like a good boy." I used to believe that too. But over the years, Derek changed. The more he earned, the colder he became. He'd drive up in his new black SUV wearing a Rolex I didn't recognize. Talk about liquid assets, and ROI, like love, was a spreadsheet. When Vanessa joined his world, it only got worse. She started calling me Maggie, not Mom, not even Mrs. Lane, just Maggie, like I was a stranger renting a room in their investment property. I should have seen the signs, the whispers about refinancing, the temporary loan agreements Derek asked me to sign without reading. He said it was to simplify the paperwork, and I believed him, because that's what mothers do, they believe. The night before the police came, I didn't sleep. I walked from room to room, touching everything Richard had built. The porch railing he carved by hand, the photo frames he painted himself. I thought about what would happen when they took it all away, where I would go, what I would be. But then I remembered something Richard said the week before he died. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. He'd just finished paying off the last mortgage bill. He turned to me and said, "If anyone ever tries to take this house from you, promise me you'll fight." At the time, I laughed. Who would take it from me? Now I knew. I'd made that promise, and I intended to keep it. So while Derek and Vanessa were drawing up their little plans, I was doing something they never imagined an old woman could. I was learning. I went down to the library, talked to a volunteer who used to be a paralegal, and asked her what to do if someone forged documents against your will. She showed me everything: how to file a report, how to get a property fraud alert, how to contact the county clerk. It wasn't much, but it was enough. So when Derek said, "You're moving out tomorrow," I already knew tomorrow wasn't going to go the way they planned. And as I sat there listening to the police question them in my living room, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not fear, but strength. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt like I was standing again. It all started a few weeks before the police came at Derek's birthday dinner. He'd insisted we celebrate at the Coral Grill, a fancy seafood restaurant near the marina, the kind of place that served lobster tails the size of your hand and charged $20 just for a glass of wine. I offered to cook at home, but Vanessa laughed. Mom, no offense, but Derek deserves something a little more upscale this year. That should have been my first warning. The night was humid, the air thick with salt, and the smell of grilled shrimp. I wore my best blue dress, the one Richard bought me for our 25th anniversary, even though the zipper was stiff now. I sat near the window, watching the boat sway in the water while Derek scrolled through his phone. "Put that thing down," I teased gently. "You can't even look at your mother on your birthday." He glanced up, half smiling. "Just checking some work stuff, Mom. It's been a long week." Vanessa sipped her martini. "You know Derek's company just closed another property deal. $4.5 million. That's why he's been so busy." She turned to him, smiling with her lips, not her eyes. "You really carry so much weight, honey." I nodded, trying to keep up. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your father would have been so proud." But Derek didn't look proud. He looked tired, maybe even guilty. Then the waiter came all smiles, setting down plates of oysters, scallops, and fish I couldn't pronounce. "Compliments of the chef," he said. "Mr. Lane's been one of our best clients." I blinked. "Clients?" Vanessa chuckled. "We come here a lot, business meetings. You know how it is, network impress investors, sign contracts." She leaned closer, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Oh, and we used your name once to get the senior discount. Hope you don't mind." The table laughed, even Derek, though it sounded forced. My cheeks burned. I smiled, but something inside me sank. It wasn't the joke itself, it was how easy it was for them to laugh at me, like I was just another silly old lady. When dessert came, the waitress brought a sparkler stuck into a slice of key lime pie. "Happy birthday, Derek," she chirped. Everyone clapped, everyone but me, because when Derek leaned over to blow out the sparkler, I saw the envelope. Vanessa slipped across the table toward him. He opened it, frowned, and whispered, "Now." She nodded, and then he cleared his throat. "Mom, there's something we need to discuss." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What is it?" Vanessa straightened her voice, suddenly businesslike. "It's about the house. You've been living there alone for years, and honestly, it's not practical anymore. The upkeep, the insurance, it's too much for you." "I managed just fine," I said quietly. She smiled, that polite, fake kind of smile people wear when they're about to insult you. "Be that as it may, the market's hot right now. We could sell it for over $1 million, maybe more. Derek and I already have an offer." My chest tightened. "You already have an offer?" Derek avoided my eyes, cutting into his pie. "It's just something we're exploring, Mom. You'd get part of it, of course." "Part of it," I repeated. "Richard built that house with his hands. You were born there." Vanessa's tone sharpened. "Exactly. It's nostalgia, not practicality. You can't keep holding on to the past, Margaret." The way she said my name, cold-clipped, made my stomach twist. The table next to us went quiet. I realized people were watching. "Please," I whispered, "not here." "Oh, why not?" she snapped, voice rising. "You've been freeloading off Derek for years. You don't even pay full property tax. You should be grateful he hasn't sold the place sooner." I heard a clatter behind me, a waiter dropping a tray. A woman at the next table muttered, "Lord have mercy," under her breath. I wanted to disappear. But then something unexpected happened. The older man sitting nearby, gray hair, sunburned neck, probably a retired fisherman, turned toward Vanessa. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "you don't talk to your mama like that. Not in public, not ever." Vanessa blinked, speechless. Derek's face went crimson. "I'm sorry," I said quickly to the man. "It's all right, it's just a misunderstanding." But he shook his head. "Doesn't look like one." He turned to me. "You hold your ground, miss. You built what they're spending." His words hit me harder than I expected. I nodded, my throat burning. When the check came, Vanessa reached for it, then looked at me. "You still have your card, right? You can cover the tip." I stared at her, wondering how a woman could smile so wide while cutting so deep. I pulled out my wallet, my hands trembling, and left a $20 bill on the table. It wasn't much, but it was dignity. As we walked out into the warm night air, I looked at Derek one last time and said, "You used to hold my hand when we crossed this parking lot. Remember?" He didn't answer. The wind picked up carrying the smell of salt and betrayal, and somewhere behind me I could still hear that fisherman's voice echoing in my head. "Hold your ground, miss, you built what they're spending." After that dinner, things changed. Derek stopped calling me altogether. Vanessa would text once in a while, short messages that sounded more like reminders than family updates. "Please keep the lawn trimmed. Realtor coming by next week. Don't forget HOA fees are due." I used to smile when my phone buzzed. Now every vibration felt like a warning. 2 weeks later, they came by unannounced again. I was out back watering the hydrangeas Richard planted along the fence. The late afternoon sun burned low and the smell of salt from the ocean drifted through the air. I loved that time of day, quiet, golden, peaceful. But that peace shattered the second I heard Vanessa's heels click against the porch. "Margaret!" She called out, her tone sharp, impatient. "We need to talk." Derek followed behind her, looking uneasy. He had that same posture he used to get before telling me he'd crashed the family car in high school, hands in pockets, chin down, eyes everywhere but mine. I set the watering can aside and wiped my hands on my apron. What is it now? Vanessa didn't waste a second. "We've scheduled the appraisal. The agent's coming at 4. You'll need to be out of the way, maybe go to the diner or something." I blinked. "You're bringing a realtor here without asking me." "It's not about asking," she snapped. "It's about process. You're not the only name on the deed. Remember?" I could feel my chest tighten, the old ache I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "Vanessa, this is still my home." "Richard and I." "Oh, please stop romanticizing a house. It's wood and drywall, Margaret. Derek and I have real plans for our future, and this property is key to that." "Real plans," I repeated. "What about my future?" She laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Your future? You're 70, living off Social Security and sentiment. You should be thanking us for helping you transition before it's too late." Something inside me broke right then, not a clean snap, but a slow, grinding tear that hurt more because it was quiet. Derek shifted awkwardly. "Mom, maybe you could start packing a few things. We can get movers to handle the rest." I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd once carried through a hurricane when he was 5. Both of us soaked and terrified. "You really want me gone, don't you?" He hesitated, then said softly, "It's just time." Before I could answer, Vanessa walked to the door, flung it open, and called into the house. "Hey, over here!" A tall man in a navy polo stepped inside, the realtor clipboard in hand. He smiled politely. "Hi there, Mrs. Lane. I'm just here to take a few photos for the listing. Shouldn't take long." Listing. The word echoed in my head like thunder. He walked through the living room, snapping pictures of Richard's fishing trophies, the quilt I'd made for Derek when he was 10, the rocking chair where I'd sat every night reading the Bible after Richard died. Each click felt like a small theft. Vanessa followed him, narrating cheerfully. "It's a charming little property, ocean breeze, solid foundation. Of course it needs updates, floors, maybe repaint the cabinets, but the location's prime." "Prime," I repeated under my breath. "Prime enough to push an old woman out of her home." The realtor froze, awkward smile fading. I can come back another time if this isn't—" "No, finish your photos," Vanessa said curtly. "She's emotional. You know how that generation gets?" "That generation?" I turned to her, my voice trembling. "Don't you dare talk about me like I'm not standing here." She smirked. "Well, maybe if you acted your age, people would treat you like an adult instead of a charity case." I took a deep breath. I gave up my career to raise Derek. I worked nights cleaning offices so he could go to college. "Everything you two have now was earned," she cut in. "We didn't ask for your sacrifices, Margaret. You chose them. Don't hold that over us." The words sliced through me like glass. For a moment, no one moved. The realtor glanced at Derek, clearly uncomfortable. Then from the doorway, a voice called out, "Mr. Holden, my neighbor, the retired cop who lived next door." He must have heard the shouting. "Everything all right in there?" he asked. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Just a family matter." But Mr. Holden stepped in anyway, his weathered face calm but firm. "Family or not, yelling at your mama like that isn't decent." He looked at Derek. "You were raised better than this." Derek's shoulders tensed. "Mr. Holden, it's complicated." "Doesn't look complicated to me," the old man said. Looks cruel." I wanted to thank him, but my voice was gone. My throat burned and tears I'd been holding back finally slipped down. Vanessa noticed and muttered, "Oh, for God's sake. Here come the waterworks." Mr. Holden took a step forward. "You ought to leave, ma'am. Give her some peace." Vanessa's expression hardened. "She'll have plenty of peace once she's out of our house." Something inside me snapped again, only this time it wasn't pain. It was fire. I stood straight, my voice low but steady. "You can take your pictures, your offers, and your plans, but until that paperwork settled in court, this house is mine." The room went silent. The realtor lowered his camera. Mr. Holden gave me a small nod, quiet approval like a soldier recognizing another fighter. Vanessa sneered. "We'll see about that." She stormed out, dragging Derek with her. The door slammed so hard the shelves on the shelf rattled. When their car pulled away, Mr. Holden turned to me. "You all right, Miss Maggie?" I wiped my eyes and nodded. "Not yet," I said softly. "But I will be." He smiled faintly. "Good, because something tells me this ain't over." And he was right. It wasn't even close to over. 3 days after that confrontation, I came home from the grocery store to find the locks changed. At first, I thought I'd used the wrong key. I jiggled it, twisted it, tried again. Then I noticed the shiny new deadbolt. My heart dropped. The plastic bag slipped from my hands, oranges rolling across the porch. Vanessa's SUV was in the driveway. I banged on the door. "Derek, open. This door right now." Silence. Then through the window, I saw Vanessa's shadow glide past phone pressed to her ear. A second later, she opened the door just wide enough to sneer at me. "Oh, hi, Margaret. Didn't you get the memo? We changed the locks this morning. You're not supposed to be here." "What memo?" I said, my voice trembling. "This is my house." She leaned against the doorframe, looking perfectly calm. "Not according to the updated deed." Behind her, Derek appeared holding a folder. His face looked pale, conflicted. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" I snapped. "You locked your mother out of her own home." "It's temporary," he mumbled. We had to move fast to close the deal." "What deal?" Vanessa crossed her arms. "The sale. We accepted an offer yesterday. $1. $3 million cash buyer. Inspections next week." I could barely breathe. "You can't do that without my consent." She smirked. "Oh, but we can. You signed a co-ownership transfer form last year, remember? The one Derek brought for you to sign for the insurance renewal?" "Yeah. Turns out that gave him legal right to sell." My knees buckled. I grabbed the porch rail to steady myself. "You lied to me." Vanessa shrugged. "You should have read it." Something inside me went cold. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was grief all over again, a second death, only this time the person buried was me. "Where am I supposed to go?" I whispered. Vanessa smiled sweetly. "Don't worry. We've arranged a temporary place for you. There's a nursing facility in Jupiter, clean, quiet ocean view. They have bingo nights and group therapy. You'll fit right in. I don't need a home for strangers." "Well," she said lightly, "you don't have a home for family anymore." She shut the door in my face. I stood there for a long time listening to the sound of my own breathing, the faint buzz of cicadas in the distance. The heat was suffocating. A couple walking their dog slowed down on the sidewalk watching. I pretended to check my purse so they wouldn't see the tears streaming down my face. I drove to the diner on Atlantic Avenue, the same one Richard and I used to visit every Sunday after church. Patty, the waitress, saw me and frowned. "You look like you've been hit by a truck, Miss Maggie." "You okay?" I sat down, trying to steady my hands. My son changed the locks. Her eyes widened. "You mean Derek, the same one who bought you that fancy new TV last Christmas? That was with my money," I said bitterly. "I just didn't realize it at the time." Patty sighed, sliding a cup of coffee in front of me. "You want me to call someone? Maybe your pastor?" I shook my head. "No, just let me sit for a bit." From the corner booth, I could see the ocean glittering in the distance, tourists, laughing kids, running with ice cream cones. Life went on like my world hadn't just collapsed. That's when Mr. Holden walked in. He must have heard from someone in the neighborhood. "You all right, Miss Maggie?" he asked, sliding into the booth across from me. I tried to smile. "Do I look all right?" he grunted. "Didn't think so." I went by your place earlier, saw the locksmith truck. You want to tell me what's going on? I told him everything. The forged papers, the sale, the nursing home threat. His jaw tightened. That's elder coercion, plain and simple, he said. They can't legally remove you like that without due process. Try telling them that, I muttered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad. My buddy still works at the Palm County Sheriff's Office. Let me make a few calls. You hang tight, okay? I nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you, Mr. Holden. Don't thank me yet, he said. Just promise me you won't leave town. You have rights, Miss Maggie. You just gotta fight for them. After he left, I sat there long after my coffee went cold. The waitress refilled it twice without asking. Somewhere between the third refill and the sunset, something inside me shifted. I'd spent my entire life putting others first. Richard, Derek, even Vanessa. I'd forgiven lies, ignored insults, and swallowed pride for the sake of peace. But peace, I realized, doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing up when no one expects you to. When I finally got up to leave, I pulled out the tiny key I'd kept on my necklace for 20 years, the one Richard had given me just in case. It didn't open the front door, not anymore, but it opened something more important. The lockbox hidden under the porch steps. Inside that box, wrapped in an old towel, were papers Richard had left me years ago. Our original deed unaltered, notarized and signed solely in his name. I remembered him saying, "Keep this safe, Maggie. One day you'll need to prove what's yours." I ran my fingers over his signature and whispered, "You always knew, didn't you?" My phone buzzed just then, a text from Derek. "Don't come back. Vanessa's serious about the restraining order." I stared at the message for a long time. Then for the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I took a photo of the original deed, attached it to an email, and sent it to Mr. Holden with one sentence, "I think I just found what we need." That night, I sat alone in my car behind the diner until the parking lot lights flickered off. The box, with Richard's documents, rested on the passenger seat beside me, covered by an old cardigan. I ran my fingers over the worn metal lid, tracing the scratches he'd made when he built it himself. My husband was never fancy, but everything he did with purpose. I remember the day he gave me that lockbox. It was spring, maybe 15 years ago. He'd just come back from the doctor, blood pressure, high heart-skipping beats. He looked tired, but smiled the way he always did when he didn't want me to worry. He placed the box in my hands and said, "If anything ever happens to me, promise you'll keep this safe. Not in the safe, not at the bank here, where nobody thinks to look." I'd laughed. "You make it sound like a spy movie." He kissed my forehead. "No, Maggie. It's a love story. I just don't want anyone rewriting it when I'm gone." At the time, I thought he was talking about memories. I didn't realize he meant our life itself, our house, our future, everything we built. Now, sitting there in the dark, I finally understood. The streets were quiet except for the sound of the waves in the distance and a seagull crying somewhere overhead. Palm trees swayed under the streetlight. The Florida night was heavy and still. I used to love this kind of night when Richard and I would sit on the porch swing, listening to the ocean hum. But now it just felt lonely. I thought about Derek, my only son. I could still see his little face pressed against the window the day we moved into that house. He was 6, holding a stuffed dolphin and shouting, "Is this really ours?" "Mom, yes," I'd told him, smiling. "All ours." We didn't have much then. Richard was still working long shifts with the Coast Guard, and I cleaned rooms at a motel off Highway 1 to make ends meet. I used to sneak Derek into the motel pool after hours, just so he could swim under the lights. He'd laugh so loud the night manager would come out and pretend to scold us, then wink and say 5 more minutes. Every dollar we saved went into that house. Richard built the porch himself. I painted every wall, planted every flower. I worked 3 jobs sometimes, cashier, janitor, caretaker, so Derek could go to college without loans. And now he was selling the only thing I had left of my husband. The betrayal hurt more than losing the house. It was like Derek had erased Richard, too. Turned everything we'd sacrificed into a transaction. But under all that pain, something else was stirring. A quiet anger, the kind that doesn't explode, it hardens. I took a deep breath and whispered to the empty car, "You think I'm weak because I'm old, but you've forgotten who raised you. When the sky started to lighten, I drove down to the pier. The fishermen were already there, men my age casting lines, drinking black coffee from paper cups. I sat on the bench Richard built for the community years ago. It still had the little brass plaque in memory of Richard Lane for those who keep the shore alive. I ran my hand over the engraving and smiled through tears. A few seagulls swooped low, fighting over scraps near the water. I watched them for a while, and something about their stubbornness made me laugh softly. They never gave up, no matter how many waves knocked them back. That's when I decided I wasn't leaving Florida. I wasn't going to let Vanessa rewrite my story or Richard's. When I got home to the small rental unit Mr. Holden had helped me find, I opened the lockbox again. Inside were the deed, a few letters, and something else I hadn't noticed before, an old envelope tucked beneath the papers. My name was written on it in Richard's handwriting, neat and careful. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a short note. Maggie, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop what's coming. I know our son loves you, but love changes when money gets involved. Don't trust signatures you didn't read. Keep the original deed. It's proof of everything we earned. And remember, our house is built on more than wood. It's built on your strength. If they ever turn against you, you'll know what to do. Love always, Richard. I pressed the paper to my heart. It felt like he was still there, whispering those words in my ear. For the first time in weeks, I slept. The next morning, Mr. Holden called. "Got your message," he said. "That deed's legit. County records show the transfer Derek filed was forged. Someone altered the document after the fact." I sat up, heart pounding. "So what does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "you might just have a case. A case." The word felt powerful. For years I'd been told I was too old, too fragile, too sentimental. Now suddenly I wasn't just a victim, I was a witness. After hanging up, I opened my window and let the ocean breeze fill the room. It smelled like salt and freedom. I whispered, "You were right, Richard. I know what to do now." But even as I said it, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Derek and Vanessa wouldn't go down quietly. They had lawyers' money influence. Still, they didn't have what I had, truth. And I'd learned long ago that the truth, once it finds its way into the light, has a power no money can buy. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote down everything I remembered, dates, conversations, texts, every word, every lie, every threat. I wasn't sure what it would lead to yet, but I knew this. They'd taken almost everything from me. Almost. But not my will. Not my fight. Not yet. The morning after Mr. Holden's call, I drove to the county clerk's office in downtown Palm Beach. It was one of those sterile government buildings with humming fluorescent lights and the faint smell of burnt coffee. I waited nearly 40 minutes for my number to be called, clutching Richard's original deed like it was a lifeline. When I finally sat down with the clerk, a woman in her 50s with glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, she flipped through my papers carefully. "Well, Mrs. Lane," she said, adjusting her glasses, "your husband's deed is indeed valid, signed, notarized, and recorded in 1998, but—" I felt my stomach tighten. "But what?" She turned the monitor toward me. 2 years ago, a new document was added to the file, one transferring ownership to your son, Derek Lane. "See here." She pointed at the digital signature. That's where things get strange. The signature was logged electronically. No physical notarization, no in-person witness. That's not standard procedure for a transfer of this kind, so it's forged. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It certainly looks suspicious. I'll print you the metadata records. You might want to bring these to law enforcement or a real estate attorney." When she handed me the papers, I noticed something, an email address linked to the file submission, vmercer.lanerealestatefell.com. Vanessa's maiden name was Mercer. I stared at the printout, the anger rising in my chest like a storm surge. They hadn't just lied, they'd built the entire betrayal under my roof, using Derek's company. On my way out, I called Mr. Holden. "You're not going to believe this," I said, explaining what I found. He whistled softly. "You're telling me she filed the transfer herself. That's felony fraud, Miss Maggie. You just found your smoking gun. I'm not ready to go to the police yet," I said. "Not until I have more." He paused. You've got something in mind, don't you? I smiled faintly. Richard taught me to fish. Sometimes you don't yank the line the second you feel a tug. You wait. Let the fish think it's safe. That evening, I returned to the house. The locks were new, but the security camera Derek installed above the porch was still there. He'd bragged about it years ago, high-resolution motion-activated cloud storage backup. He wanted to keep an eye on me while traveling, or so he said. But if it still backed up to the cloud, maybe, just maybe, it still held footage, Mr. Holden met me at the curb. You sure you want to do this? I'm not breaking in, I said, showing him the tiny metal box I carried. Inside was the camera's backup drive Richard had installed before Derek upgraded the system. Just checking what already belongs to me. We took the drive to his house where his grandson helped us connect it to a laptop. It took a few minutes to load. The old files were massive. But when they finally appeared, my breath caught. There on the screen was a thumbnail, labeled April 16, 22.mov. I clicked it. The footage showed my living room, me sitting at the table signing what I thought were insurance documents. Derek was across from me, tapping the papers impatiently. Come on, Mom! His voice crackled through the speaker. It's just standard paperwork for the property tax. Vanessa's voice chimed in off-screen. Yeah, initial here and here. We've got to send it tonight. I watched myself hesitate, squinting at the text, then signing anyway. Then Vanessa whispered something I'd missed that day, something faint but clear now. Perfect. Once this scans, she's out. My chest went cold. Mr. Holden leaned back in his chair. Well, damn. That's the clearest evidence I've ever seen. I couldn't speak. I just sat there watching the moment over and over, the trust in my eyes, the deceit in hers. Can we copy this? I asked finally. Already done, his grandson said, dragging the file to a flash drive. I exhaled shakily. Good, because now I'm ready. That night I went home to my small rental. The sound of the ocean drifted through the window again, soft and steady. For the first time, it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like Richard, calm, patient, reminding me that tides always turn. I sat at my kitchen table, the flash drive next to my coffee mug, and wrote a list in my notebook. County deed records printed. Camera footage backed up. Witness Mr. Holden. The last line I added slowly. Confrontation TBD. I didn't know yet how or when I'd reveal it. All I knew was that when I did, they wouldn't see it coming. Before bed, I checked my email. There was one new message from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You don't know me, but I worked with your son." I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single line of text. If you want proof of what they did, meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the old pier. No name, no phone number, just that. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. Whoever it was, they knew something, and if they were willing to reach out to me, maybe they had more than I ever could find alone. The tide whispered outside, soft but insistent. Maybe Richard was right. Sometimes you just have to wait for the current to bring what's yours back to shore. I didn't sleep that night. The message from the unknown sender kept replaying in my head like a heartbeat. If you want proof of what they did, meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the old pier. By sunrise, I'd already dressed, packed my purse with the flash drive, the documents, and a small recorder Richard had once used for his fishing logs. I didn't know what I was walking into, but something deep inside told me this was part of what he'd meant when he wrote, "You'll know what to do." The morning air at the pier was thick with mist, the horizon barely visible beyond the fog. I sat on a weathered bench near the end of the dock, the wood creaking beneath me. Every minute felt longer than the last. Then a man approached, tall, late 30s, maybe, hair tied back, wearing a faded polo with a company logo, Lane Realty Group. My stomach tightened. "Mrs. Lane," he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "And you are?" He glanced around nervously. "Name's Travis. I used to work for your son, accounting department." I studied his face. He looked tired, scared, the kind of man who'd seen something he wished he hadn't. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Nothing, he said quickly. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Vanessa told Derek to move money through the company's trust account last year, said it was for family assets. But when I checked the transactions, I saw your name money from Richard's estate wired into a private account under Vanessa Mercer Holdings, LLC. It wasn't just the house, Mrs. Lane. She's been draining everything tied to your husband's name. I felt the air leave my lungs. Everything, he nodded. Your husband had life insurance policies, small investments, things you probably never even knew existed. She found them, liquidated them. I swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? He looked at the water. Because I got fired last month for asking questions, and because I remember you bringing us donuts every Christmas. You don't deserve what they're doing. From his pocket, he pulled a small USB drive. Here, internal records. Emails bank, transfers her name on every one. I made copies before I left. They'll try to bury it, but now at least you've got proof. I stared at it stunned. Travis, you're risking a lot. He smiled sadly. So are you. And just like that, he walked away, disappearing into the fog before I could even thank him. I sat there for a long time holding that USB in my hand. It was cold, heavier than it looked. I knew right then this wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about justice for Richard, for myself, for every mother who'd ever been cast aside like a burden. That afternoon, I went to see Mr. Holden again. He was sitting on his porch with his dog reading the newspaper. When I handed him the USB, his eyebrows shot up. You've been busy, he said. I've been learning, I replied. He chuckled softly. You sure you weren't a detective in another life? Just a wife who paid attention, I said. We plugged the drive into his laptop. Inside were folders labeled invoices, transfers, and client memos. One file caught my eye, Family Portfolio Docs EX. When we opened it, Vanessa's name was everywhere, her signature approving multiple transactions totaling over $480,000. The notes claimed the funds were for estate restructuring under joint authorization, but every authorization field had the same forged signature mine. Mr. Holden whistled. That's grand larceny right there. I leaned back, exhaling. Then we've got them. He looked at me thoughtfully. You going to the cops with this? Not yet, I said. Not until I see their faces when the truth hits them. That night I called Derek. It was the first time I'd spoken to him since the locks changed. Mom, his voice was wary. Why are you calling? I just wanted to say I'm sorry, I said, softly. There was a pause. Sorry. For what? For causing trouble. For not understanding your plans. You were right. I can't take care of the house anymore. I could almost hear the relief in his sigh. Mom, that means a lot. Vanessa thought you'd fight this forever. Oh, I've done enough fighting, I said, forcing a chuckle. Listen, why don't you both come by this weekend? One last dinner in the old place before you finalize the sale. My treat. I'll even make your favorite shrimp gumbo. He hesitated. Vanessa won't like that. Tell her it's for closure, I said gently. For the family. He agreed after a moment, his voice almost kind again. All right, Mom. Saturday night. When I hung up, Mr. Holden, who'd been listening from across the porch, raised an eyebrow. You're really going to cook for them? Of course not, I said with a grin I hadn't worn in years. But they don't need to know that yet. He laughed. You've got that look, Miss Maggie. The same one I saw in Rookies right before they walked into a sting operation. I smiled faintly. Let's just say it's time they see who they underestimated. That night, I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd act, what I'd wear. I made a mental list, plates, napkins, the old casserole dish Richard loved. I wanted everything to look normal, familiar, because the more comfortable they were, the harder the fall would be. As I drifted off to sleep, the sound of the waves outside lulled me like a promise. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Saturday arrived like a storm pretending to be calm. The sky was bright, the air smelled of salt and jasmine, and the ocean breeze slid through the palm leaves like nothing bad could ever happen here. But my heart thudded in my chest like a warning drum. I spent the morning setting the table, the same oak table Richard and I had bought secondhand for $40 the year Derek was born. It still had the scratch from when Derek dropped his toy car on it at age 5. I ran my fingers over that mark, now thinking of how easily innocence fades. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Vanessa entered first, all perfume and polished heels, followed by Derek in a crisp blue shirt. They both looked like they were walking into a victory parade. Wow, Vanessa said, glancing around. You actually cleaned the place up. I didn't think you'd bother since Since it won't be mine much longer, I finished for her. She smiled tightly. Exactly. I forced a gentle laugh. Well, I figured if you're going to sell, it might as well make it shine for the buyers. Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. That's the spirit, Margaret. Derek nodded awkwardly. Thanks for inviting us, Mom. I wasn't sure after everything water under the bridge, I interrupted softly. Life's too short to hold grudges. They seemed relieved by that. Vanessa even offered to help in the kitchen, though she didn't actually lift a finger. When we sat down to eat, I kept the conversation light, asked about Derek's business, complimented Vanessa's dress. I smiled at all the right times, even when my stomach churned with disgust. At one point, Derek raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. To new beginnings, I echoed, forcing a smile. We clinked glasses, and for a few minutes we almost looked like a family again. Almost. But then between bites of gumbo, Vanessa leaned back and said casually, So we signed the final escrow papers yesterday. The buyer wired the full amount. Closing's on Monday. Congratulations, I said, my voice calm. That must feel liberating. Oh, it does, she said, beaming. We'll be moving into the Sarasota property next week. It's nearly 4,000 square feet pool 3-car garage. The realtor said it's one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the area. Exclusive, I repeated softly. How fitting. She smirked, mistaking my tone for envy. Don't worry, Margaret, we didn't forget you. Derek's transferring a small amount into your account to help with your living expenses. Consider it our way of saying thank you. I nodded. That's very generous. Derek glanced at her uneasy. Vanessa. What she said, eyes glinting. It's true. She's lucky we're being kind. Most people her age would be thrilled to move into assisted living. Her words hung in the air like poison. I took a slow sip of water, pretending not to care. Well, I suppose everyone gets what they deserve, one way or another. Vanessa laughed lightly. Exactly. You understand. Derek shifted in his seat, clearly wanting to change the subject. Mom, I know this has been hard, but maybe once the check clears, we can help you find a smaller place that won't be necessary. I interrupted, smiling. I already have plans. Oh, Vanessa asked. Yes, I said. In fact, you'll find out soon enough. She frowned, confused, but before she could ask, there was a knock on the door. 3 sharp raps. Derek looked at me. You expecting someone? Yes, I said. Dessert delivery. I wanted tonight to be special. Vanessa rolled her eyes. You ordered dessert from where the nursing home cafeteria. I ignored her and went to open the door. Mr. Holden stood outside wearing his old sheriff's jacket. Behind him were 2 uniformed officers. Evening, Miss Maggie, he said quietly. Mind if we come in? Derek stood up, alarmed. What's going on? Mer Holden gave him a polite nod. You must be Derek Lane. And you, ma'am, Vanessa Mercer. We'd like to ask you both a few questions regarding property transfers and financial documents filed under your names. Vanessa laughed nervously. Excuse me, you can't just barge in like this. Do you have a warrant? The officer beside him lifted a folder. Actually, ma'am, we do. Derek's face drained of color. This has to be some mistake. I walked back to the table, calm as ever, and sat down. No mistake, I said softly. Please have a seat. I think we should all listen carefully. Vanessa turned to me, eyes blazing. You did this. I met her glare steadily. I told you, everyone gets what they deserve. Mr. Holden placed the flash drive and papers on the table. We have video evidence of Mrs. Lane being coerced into signing forged documents, plus internal accounting records linking you, Mrs. Mercer, to embezzled funds from the Lane Family Trust. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Vanessa tried to speak, but her voice cracked. This is insane. Derek, say something. He looked at her helplessly, sweat beading on his forehead. Vanessa, tell me you didn't... Oh, grow up, she snapped. You knew about the transfers. No, I didn't, he shouted. You said it was legal. Legal, Mr. Holden said dryly. Not even close. Vanessa's face twisted, her composure finally cracking. You can't prove anything. Mr. Holden nodded to the officers. Actually, we can. The state attorney's office already reviewed the files. The officers stepped forward. One of them said, Vanessa Mercer, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and elder coercion. She shrieked, backing away. You can't do this. As they took her hands behind her back, Derek just stood there trembling, watching his world collapse. When the door closed behind them, he turned to me. Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Vanessa said it was a good investment. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at him, my heart aching with 1,000 memories. You didn't hurt me, Derek. You disappointed me. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights lit up the front yard, reflecting against the windows. The neighbors gathered quietly on their porches, watching. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small or powerless. I felt steady, like the ground beneath me had finally stopped shifting. As Mr. Holden patted my shoulder and said, "It's over, Miss Maggie." I shook my head gently. "No," I whispered, "not yet," because I still had one more thing to do. After the police took Vanessa away, the house fell silent. Only the sound of the waves outside filled the space, soft and steady, like a heartbeat returning to normal after years of chaos. Derek sat across from me at the kitchen table, his face, pale, eyes hollow. The boy who once begged me to stay up late and read him bedtime stories was gone. In his place sat a man who looked completely lost. "Mom," he whispered, "what happens now?" I folded my hands, looking at him for a long moment. "That depends, Derek. Do you want the truth, or do you just want me to make you feel better?" He swallowed hard. "The truth." I nodded slowly. "Then listen carefully, because this isn't over, not for me, not for you." Mr. Holden had gone to finish the paperwork with the officers, but before he left, he gave me a knowing look. "I'll make sure the files go straight to the county prosecutor," he'd said. "You've got justice coming, Miss Maggie." Justice. It sounded good, but I'd learned that justice doesn't fix broken hearts. I turned to Derek. "Your father tried to protect this family long before he died. He saw things coming that you and I couldn't. That's why he left more than just this house behind." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I got up, walked to the cabinet beside the fridge, and pulled out a small metal box. It looked identical to the one I'd kept the deed in. I placed it on the table and slid it toward him. "Your father kept a second box," I said. "He told me not to open it unless I had no other choice. Tonight feels like the right time." I opened the lid. Inside were a few papers yellowed with age and an old envelope addressed to the executor of the Lane family estate. I unfolded the first page, Richard's handwriting neat as ever. If this letter is being read, then my wife and I are no longer in agreement on the definition of family. Should anyone attempt to manipulate or remove Margaret from our home, this will serve as my final amendment to the estate plan. My throat tightened. I kept reading aloud. "The property at 214 Seaside Avenue shall remain in the sole ownership of Margaret Lane until her passing. Upon her death, ownership will transfer to the Lane Community Foundation, a non-profit trust established under her name to provide housing for widows of Coast Guard veterans." Derek's eyes widened. "Wait, a foundation? What foundation?" I smiled faintly. "Your father started it 15 years ago." Quietly. He never told anyone except me and his old lawyer, Mr. Whitford. He wanted the house to mean something not just to us, but to others. I handed Derek the second paper, an account statement from Suncoast Financial. The balance, $2. $8 million. His jaw dropped. Where did this come from? Richard's retirement payouts, investments, savings. He moved it into a charitable trust before he died. He told me it was, for the day, love turns into greed. Derek leaned back, stunned. "Mom, I swear I didn't know about any of this. I believe you," I said softly. "But Vanessa did. That's why she wanted the house so badly. She knew the foundation's paperwork would surface eventually. She just wanted to cash out before anyone discovered it." He covered his face with his hands. "I let her talk me into it. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't," I interrupted. "You just wanted to please her. You wanted to look successful no matter the cost." He looked up at me, tears filling his eyes. "Can I fix this? Is there any way to make it right?" I stared at him for a long time. "You can start by remembering who you are, and by understanding that success built on betrayal never lasts." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I handed him the letter Richard had written to me, the one I'd read in part 6. Derek unfolded it, his hands trembling as his father's words stared back at him. "If they ever turn against you, you'll know what to do." He swallowed hard. Dad knew this would happen. I nodded. He always saw further than the rest of us. When the police came back later that night to collect final statements, they told me something unexpected. The buyer Vanessa had arranged for the house had also been her fake company, a shell entity she controlled. The entire sale was a setup. Derek slumped back in the chair, shaking his head. How could she do this? I looked out the window at the dark ocean. People like her don't think they're doing wrong. They think they're winning. Then I turned back to him. But she forgot something. You can't build victory on someone else's grave. He lowered his head. Mom, I don't deserve forgiveness. I reached across the table and took his hand. Maybe not yet, but you can earn it. He looked at me, eyes red. How? By helping me finish what your father started, I said. We're going to reopen the foundation, use what's left of that trust to rebuild this house, not as a monument to money, but as a place for people who've lost everything to find home again. He nodded slowly, tears falling freely now. I'll do it. I'll make it right. For the first time, I believed him. Later, after everyone left, I stood alone in the living room. The house was quiet, the air heavy with memories, laughter, arguments, lullabies, storms weathered together. I walked to the porch and looked out at the moonlight shimmering on the waves. The wind carried Richard's scent, cedar and salt, and something steady like strength. I whispered, "It's done, Richard. They'll never take this place again." In the distance, I could see the flashing lights fade as the police cars drove away, leaving nothing but silence and sea. I took the deed, the foundation papers, and placed them back in the box. For the first time, I locked it, not out of fear, but out of peace. Our house was safe. But more than that, I was safe. I'd found my way back to myself. The trial began 6 months later. By then, the Florida humidity had settled heavy over everything, the air, the courthouse steps, even the marble floor inside the courtroom. But despite the heat, I felt cold. Calm, but cold. When I walked in, heads turned. I wasn't the frail old woman they'd seen months ago crying on her porch. I wore Richard's Coast Guard pin on my lapel and a simple navy dress. The bailiff nodded respectfully as I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table. Vanessa sat across the room in a gray blazer 2 sizes too big, her wrists still faintly marked from the handcuffs. Her hair, once immaculate, was dull and lifeless now. She looked like a woman who'd just realized her mask would never fit again. Derek sat behind her, not as a supporter, but as a witness for the state. He'd given full cooperation, turning over records and emails that backed every word of my claim. When our eyes met, he gave a small, remorseful nod. I returned it not as forgiveness yet, but as acknowledgement. The prosecutor, a woman named Natalie Pierce, presented the evidence clearly. Forged signatures, fake escrow accounts, falsified deeds, and embezzled funds traced directly to Vanessa's shell companies. Every word she said landed like thunder. When she played the video from the camera, the one showing Vanessa whispering, "Perfect. Once this scans, she's out." A ripple of shock spread through the courtroom. Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue mental duress, claiming she'd acted under financial stress and emotional pressure. But when Natalie showed the bank statements, hundreds of thousands spent on jewelry, designer handbags, and luxury trips, the jury's faces hardened. At one point, Vanessa turned toward me, her voice trembling. "Margaret, please. You don't understand. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted security. You thought money would buy you safety," I said quietly, "but you sold your soul for it instead." The courtroom fell silent. The judge, a stern man with kind eyes, finally spoke. "Mrs. Mercer, the evidence is overwhelming. You exploited an elderly widow, forged legal documents, and attempted to defraud your own family. You will be sentenced accordingly." When the gavel came down, the sound echoed like closure. Vanessa was sentenced to 12 years in state prison with restitution owed to the Lane Community Foundation, the very charity Richard had created. The irony was poetic. The money she stole would now rebuild what she tried to destroy. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Microphones flashed, questions flew. Mrs. Lane, how does it feel to see justice served? I looked at the sea of cameras and said simply, justice isn't revenge. It's remembering who you are after they tried to erase you. They printed that line in the Palm Beach Post the next morning. Some of the neighbors stopped by afterward bringing casseroles and hugs. You showed 'em. Miss Maggie once said, you showed 'em that age doesn't mean weak. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was release. A few days later, I found Derek waiting on the porch. He'd lost weight, looked older, not in years, but in shame. He was holding a folded newspaper in a small box. I wanted to bring you something, he said. Inside the box was Richard's old wristwatch, the one I thought had been lost years ago. Vanessa pawned it, Derek admitted softly. I tracked it down and bought it back. I thought it should be here. I ran my thumb along the glass face, cracked but still ticking. Your father wore this through every storm, I said quietly. It still works after all these years. He nodded, eyes glistening. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Mom. Maybe not, I said. But forgiveness isn't a gift you earn. It's one I choose to give. He broke down, then full sobs, raw and human. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him the way I used to when he was little, when all he needed to be fixed was a hug and a warm meal. For the first time, I felt the weight of bitterness leave me. The following month, the foundation officially launched. The first home under its program opened in Fort Pierce, a renovated duplex for widows of veterans funded by Richard's trust and restitution from the court. They named it the Margaret and Richard Lane Haven. During the ribbon cutting, the mayor shook my hand. You turned pain into purpose, ma'am. That's rare. I smiled. Richard always said a storm can drown you or clean you. The choice is yours. Later that evening, I stood alone by the ocean, the sunset painting everything gold and soft. I could hear children laughing somewhere behind me, maybe families from the neighborhood. Life had returned to this place not the same as before, but better in its honesty. Derek joined me on the sand, quiet for a long while before speaking. Mom, I've been offered a job helping with the foundation's accounting. I want to make things right. For you. For Dad. I looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time I saw the boy I'd raised, not the man who'd lost his way. I think your father would like that, I said. He smiled faintly. Maybe he's watching. I gazed out at the water where the horizon blurred between sea and sky. He is. He's always been. As we stood there, the waves lapped at our feet, washing away footprints as quickly as they were made, a reminder that everything, even pain, passes with time. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, the part I thought was stolen from me, was finally mine again. It's been a year since that night, the night the truth came crashing through the walls of my home like a storm I'd been waiting to face. Sometimes I still wake up early before sunrise and sit on the porch with my cup of coffee, listening to the sound of the waves. They don't sound angry anymore. They sound like forgiveness, soft, endless, steady. The Lane Foundation has grown faster than I ever imagined. We've housed 9 widows so far, women who, like me, lost everything but kept going anyway. I visit them every week, bringing homemade muffins or just sitting on the porch to talk. We don't speak about loss much. We speak about gardens, grandchildren, and the way the ocean can heal if you let it. Derek runs the foundation's books now. He shows up early, stays late, never complains. Some days, he brings lunch from Benny's Diner just like his father used to, and we sit in the small office laughing about things we thought we'd forgotten how to laugh about. He still apologizes sometimes. I don't know how you can even look at me, Mom, he said one afternoon, eyes full of guilt. I smiled. Because you came back. That's more than most people ever do. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without the pain. Vanessa sent me a letter from prison a few months ago. I didn't expect it. She said she was sorry that she lost herself chasing something she could never hold on to. She ended the letter with, "You were right. I thought money was security. Turns out it's just chains made of paper." I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I think she finally learned the lesson on her own. Some truths don't need to be spoken twice. The house on Seaside Avenue looks different now. The walls are repainted, the porch fixed, and the flower beds full again. But I kept the scratch on the dining table, the one from Derek's toy car. It reminds me that love leaves marks too, but not all of them hurt. Every week, tourists pass by and take pictures of the little sign by the gate, the Margaret and Richard Lane Haven built on love, saved by strength. Sometimes they ask if I'm that Margaret. I just smile and say I used to be. But in truth, I still am, just a quieter version. Not the woman crying on her porch, begging her son to remember her worth. Now I know my worth doesn't depend on who stays or who leaves. It depends on how I stand when everything else falls apart. One afternoon, I went down to the pier, the same spot where I met Travis, the accountant who risked his job to help me. He's doing well now, working with Derek at the foundation. When he saw me, he said, "You know, Mrs. Lane, you could have gone after revenge. You could have destroyed them." I looked at the horizon, the sky melting into gold. "I didn't need to destroy anyone," I said. "They did that themselves." He nodded, smiling quietly. "You're tougher than you look." "Not tough," I said, just done being silent. That night, I took out Richard's old wristwatch, the one Derek returned to me after the trial. It still ticked faint, but steady. I placed it on the porch rail, listening to it click with the rhythm of the waves. He used to tell me time doesn't heal, it teaches. And he was right. The years taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty, respect, and love that doesn't come with conditions. The saddest part is that sometimes it takes losing everything for people to see what really matters. As the sun sank lower, I thought of all the women out there, mothers, grandmothers, wives who stay quiet when they're dismissed, who give until there's nothing left to give, who are told they're too much or in the way. To them, I'd say this: don't wait for someone else to see your worth. Don't wait for permission to stand tall. You don't need to prove your value, you are the proof. Because if I've learned anything, it's that the heart once broken doesn't stay shattered forever. It grows back stronger, like sea glass once sharp, now smooth-shaped by every wave it survived. When the stars began to appear, I whispered into the wind, "We did it, Richard. We really did." A soft breeze brushed my cheek like a hand I'd known all my life. I closed my eyes and smiled. Maybe he was there. Maybe he always had been in the tide, the laughter of the widows, the forgiveness I finally found. As I got up to go inside, I turned off the porch light and took one last look at the shoreline glowing under the moon. This wasn't just my house anymore. It was a promise that love, real love, doesn't end when people change or leave or betray you. It endures. It rebuilds. And sometimes when you've lost everything, it brings you home again.